Join Katie from the Sussex Wildlife Trust for our next session on school grounds and changing climate. Together we will look at how climate change can affect us locally and what positive changes we can make to our school grounds to make them better places for pupils and wildlife. Sussex Wildlife Trust is one of the principal conservation organisations in the southeast of England, where Katie works helping schools become more sustainable and helping pupils connect with their local nature and outdoor spaces.
So hello everyone, my name is Katie. I work for the Sussex Wildlife Trust, and along with Brighton and Hove City Council, I help schools become more sustainable, and we're looking at addressing climate change too. I spend quite a lot of time working in school grounds because these are really important places for both children and for wildlife. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about the connection between school grounds, nature and climate change. And I hope there'll be some time for you to explore what you might be able to do in your school grounds. So if you've got any questions, please do type them into the box, and please feel free to use the chat box as well if you'd like to add any comments or talk. I'm going to try and share my screen so I can show you some pictures. So as I said, school grounds are really important for children. Children spend about 1/5 of their time at school playing on their school grounds, and I expect you've had lots of fun in your school grounds, enjoying playing with your friends. They're also important places to learn, and many teachers now are taking lessons outside so children can learn all about nature, but can also learn all about the other curriculum areas through learning outside. And I think you might agree that learning outside makes lessons much more fun and memorable. It's also really important for us to connect with the outdoors. After school, many children are spending much more time indoors than before. And so having a bit of time outside in our school grounds is really important for us to connect with the outside and to connect with nature. But school grounds aren't just important for children, they're also important for wildlife. And as you can see from the pictures, lots of the wildlife visits our school grounds in the day and even after school when you've all gone home. And we can make our school grounds better for wildlife by putting in extra habitats like the bug hotel that you can see there, or bird boxes, or planting flowers. There's lots of ways that we can do. But wildlife doesn't just stay in one place, it actually moves. And particularly, like in the city that I work in, which you can see the map there, school grounds are really important to help wildlife move through the city. So it joins up green spaces in the city. And we call these wildlife corridors, and they're very important to help wildlife move. But as we've heard already today, wildlife is important for our survival. It gives us so much. It gives us the air we breathe, and it gives us the food we eat. Without wildlife, none of us could survive. But our wildlife is in danger. Things like loss of habitats and pollution are affecting our wildlife. And in the last 10 years, which is probably about the time since you lot have been alive, the amount of wildlife in our country has decreased by nearly half. So 1 in 7 of our species are now threatened with extinction. So what I'd like you to do now is just have a look at those pictures that you can see on the slide and have a think. Do you know what creatures they are? And maybe just in your class, have a think about who's actually seen those creatures, either at home or in your school grounds. So we'll just have a little look at them. The first picture is of a toad. We've lost 2/3 of our toad in the last 30 years. The second picture is a bee, and 1/3 of our bees are in decline. The third picture is a hedgehog. We've lost half of our hedgehogs in the last 10 years. So that's probably within your lifetime, half of our hedgehogs have disappeared. The bird is a little house sparrow. These used to be really common, but we've lost nearly 3/4 of the house sparrows in this country in the last 30 years. The next one is a little dormouse. Again, we've lost half of these in 20 years. And wildflowers, 1/5 of our wildflowers are under threat. And the last is a butterfly. We've lost 3/4 of our butterflies in the last 40 years. So you can see this biodiversity loss is partly due to not having so much countryside, building on our countryside, having less habitats, but it's also due to other factors like pollution. But the situation is being made much worse by climate change. Our world is getting hotter. Here in the UK, we're experiencing hotter, drier summers and warmer, wetter winters. And this is making it either too hot or too wet for certain wildlife to survive. Some of our wildlife can move to find better conditions, but not all of it can. And if you were listening earlier to a session on winners and losers, you'll know all about this. But climate change doesn't just affect the wildlife in our school grounds, it also affects how we interact with it. So is it going to change the way we play and learn outside? Is it going to be too hot in summer to enjoy playing outside comfortably? Does the wetter winters mean we have lots more puddles, we have lots more mud? The sort of things that may stop some teachers letting pupils go out at playtime or using all of their grounds. So we need to think carefully about how we need to change our school grounds in response to a changing climate. Can we make them better places for children? Can we provide enough shade? Can we provide enough ways of stopping them flooding, coping with lots of rain? Can we make them better places for wildlife? Can we provide habitats for them? Can we help them act as corridors for wildlife to join other places? And can we make them better for the climate? You might have heard of carbon and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is released into our atmosphere and is one of the major causes of global warming. But we also know that plants and soil can store carbon. So by making sure we look after our green spaces and school grounds, we're also able to store carbon and help slow climate change. So have a think about a tree. Trees are great for children. They're great to play on, they're great to play around. We can use their sticks and their leaves for playing and learning. And it also provides shade for us in the summer. But it also provides a home for wildlife. Over 250 species of wildlife can live in an oak tree. They use its bark, its trunk, its leaves, its flowers, and the seeds. But trees are also really important for the climate. By turning carbon dioxide we breathe into carbon and storing it. So I'm going to show you now 12 pictures. These are all natural features you could add to your school grounds. And I'm going to give you just a minute or so in your class to have a look at these different pictures and see if you can identify what these natural features are that you might be able to put in your school grounds. So have a go, have a look at them, see if you can work out what they are. Okay, so we've got A is a hedge, B is a pond. You can just see the edge of the pond there. C is a log pile. D is some flowers. E is a bog. So a little bit like a pond, but not so full of water, but still a damp, wet area. E. F is a bug hotel. G is a willow dome. H, a compost area. I is a water butt. Now J, wonder if you got this one. J is a green roof. So it's where we plant special plants on the top of our roofs and provides an extra habitat. K is a bee home, a place where bees can lay their eggs and spend the winter. And L is a green wall. So instead of just having a concrete or a brick wall, we put some plants all along this. And it's a great way of making your school a little bit greener if you don't have a lot of nice green school grounds. So your second task is, wonder if you can look at those 12 different features and have a think about them. Now they're all good for wildlife, they're all good for nature, but have a think about them. How are they also good for children? And how are they also good for the climate? I'm going to give you another minute or two to just have a think about those and see if you can group them into things that are good for children and how are they good for the wildlife in our school grounds and how are they good for our climate. Okay, how did you do? I think it's really hard because if we're thinking about which things are good for children, which things are good for wildlife, and which school things are good for our climate, it's really difficult to separate them. Because I don't know what you found, but when I was doing this, I actually found that most of these things were good for all of us. They were good for children, maybe because they provided shade, or maybe because they stopped flooding, or maybe because they provided interesting learning areas. They were also all good for wildlife because they're providing extra habitats for our wildlife, which is struggling. And many of these features were also good for the climate. They helped soak up our carbon dioxide and store it. Or alternatively, things like the compost heap, that provided a rich source of soil that we could use for growing, so we didn't need to dig up any of our peat bogs or other forms of soil, which are again carbon stores. We can keep the carbon in the soil. And by using water, we're recycling the water and not having to use the energy to take water up from under the ground and to clean it. So hopefully you came to a similar conclusion that I did, is all these features are not only good for children, they're good for wildlife, and they're also good for the planet. And we call these natural solutions to climate change. So if we have a little look at this picture, it's showing that climate change can have an effect on nature. And as we talked about, climate change is making it harder for nature to survive. But nature and natural solutions is also able to influence climate change. So through improving nature and improving our natural solutions, we're able to help slow climate change and make our little bit of difference. So just to end with, I'd like to share with you 5 top tips for natural solutions in your school grounds. So firstly, green your grounds, plant a tree, grow a hedge or make a mini meadow. And this attracts wildlife, but also stores carbon. Secondly, just add water. Creating a pond or a bog in the wettest areas in your school grounds helps reduce flooding and make a home as well for frogs, newts and dragonflies. Use your butt. Collect water by saving water by collecting it in a water butt. Protect the pollinators, really important if we're to protect nature and to make sure that we've got enough food is protect our pollinators. And finally, go peat-free. Choose a peat-free compost to protect our peat bogs, which are a fantastic store of carbon. So finally, I'm going to ask you about what natural solutions to climate change would work in your school grounds. So just spend a minute or two talking in your class about which of these natural solutions could you add to your school grounds to do your bit for climate change. And as we share what we would like to have communities and school grounds rich in wildlife. We'd like world leaders to help nature recover and become a natural solution to climate change. What would you like? So time for you to make your pledge in your school. Have a think about what natural solutions to climate change you would like to add to your school grounds. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing now. And I'm going to have a little look in the chat box. If anyone's got anything they would like to add or any questions, then please do add them now and we'll see what we can, if we can see them. So I've got a question coming about a picture. The picture of the butterfly is on a yellow plant. It looks a little bit like ragwort. Is it poisonous? Well, ragwort, as far as I'm aware, is poisonous to horses. However, there's a lot of wildlife that does live on it and it's not poisonous to all wildlife, but it is poisonous to horses. Okay, have we got any more questions? Are there any types of wildflowers that wildlife particularly like? Well, I would suggest you plant native wildflowers. So those are wildflowers that have been in this country from a long time. They haven't come from another country because that's what our wildlife likes best. They tend to like nice colourful flowers and flowers with good smells too. So if you look up butterfly, for example, butterfly planting on Google, you Google that up, then you'll find a whole list of native wildflowers that's great for wildlife. Another question, what would be the best child and wildlife friendly hedge to plant? Yes, we have to think about which hedges are best for wildlife, and that would be a mixed native hedge. So you would be looking at maybe 5, 6, 7 different species of native plants. Some of these are a little bit spiky, so things like hawthorn and blackthorn are a bit spiky. So if you're going to have these in your school grounds, you might think about whether these are the right things to be planting. Basically, hedges are just like small trees. So any of the trees that we plant in our school grounds, we could also plant as a hedge and just keep them a little bit smaller. So thank you for your questions. And I really look forward to hearing some of your pledges and just looking at the way we can work with nature to find our natural solutions to climate change. So thank you for having me. and all the best with your work in schools.